Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Cobb and I will be doing my topic today on the Stone Age. So the first picture. The Stone Age consists of three different phases. The phases were the Paleolithic period, the Mesolithic period, and the Neolithic period. This was set up this way to help historians be able to trace where humans were at exactly during these times. So they were either placed in hunter-gatherer era or they were in early agricultural society era. The first period was the Paleolithic period, and it involved the first appearance of human beings using tools. So this was the time that humans were experiencing hunting, fishing, and gathering. They started to use these implements and weld them to create fire during these phases also. The Stone Age can be said to have the first behaviors that really allowed humans to evolve into who we are today. At this time, the way people lived was not exactly ideal, but early humans were able to survive off of what they had. The next phase was the Mesolithic period. This phase was when historians started to find evidence of what would have been already well-organized collective hunting activities going on. The people of this period had a level of change and development that was just enough, but not enough to completely change who they were entirely. Even though this was termed the Stone Age, not all tools were made from exclusively just stone. Some were made from other materials like antler, bone, fiber, leather, and wood. It was assumed that stone was the more favored item because it was more durable. Early humans needed something that was going to be able to withstand the cold temperatures that they experienced, the very dry climates that they were in. Another material that they were also big on during using the Stone Age was clay. They had a lot of clay pottery going on as well that they would also be using for trade during certain times. During the Stone Age, they have what we now call Paleolithic art. This type of art can also be called representational art. To this day, you can find Paleolithic art in museums all over the world. It can be used as a way for historians to study what and how humans developed and how they developed into what it is today. There are cave paintings in places like France and Spain that still feature these animals and symbols and even proto-stories. Some people theorize that this art was made to document and identify predators and prey. Another theory is that they were used to simply just for storytellings around the campfire to children. Some Paleolithic art is also thought to have religious meaning to it. Some of these cave drawings were done in caves so dark that you weren't able to see anything unless it was with fire. The introduction of fire into the Stone Age was a very pivotal moment for early humans. It started to open up many, many doors. Fire brought in warmth, it brought in light, it helped to cook food that was easier for digestion for early humans. It was also able to help control predators, like the saber-toothed tiger the saber-toothed cat was extremely known to hate fire. For early humans, being able to control fire may have been an issue. They lacked that cognitive ability to conceptualize the idea of fire that we have now today. Evidence around the world also helps us to see where the fire was making its way during the Paleolithic period. There are sites in Africa that contain possible evidence of fire from burned rocks. As the Stone Age went on, they did enter the Microlithic Innovation era. This was said to be when they became less caveman-like. During the Paleolithic era, the continents were forming into their places that they can now be found in today. There was one continent shift that was thought to have the biggest influence on the Stone Age, and that was the creation of the land bridge. So the land bridge, as North America became newly connected to South America, it formed a land bridge of Central America. which is now what we call the Great American Interchange. This allowed for hundreds of different North American animal species to now cross into South America and vice versa. So as seen on the picture, there was zebras that were involved in this, the certain types of turtles, just different animals during that time that were now crossing over. And this single interchange had a profound effect on the ecosystem of both continents. North America has animal species such as the armadillo, porcupines, possums, and because these animals' ancestors were able to travel up north during this interchange, it changed the way that they were forever. The Himalayans, the Rocky Mountains, the Appalachians were all also forming just as the Paleolithic had began. Not only were these new things forming, but the world generally was becoming cool. The ice caps were starting to form in Antarctica. This meant that animals had to learn to adapt and how to do it fast in order to survive. These glacier advances dropped sea levels up to 100 meters. This meant that entire lands were consumed by water. At one point, the North Sea was completely covered in a frozen blanket and made it impossible to cross at that time. So in this photo here, you can see how much more ice there was during the Ice Age period on the left side versus on the right side. That is what we have today. As the Paleolithic began, there were species of humans called the Homo erectus. These species were first discovered by Eugene Dubois, who was a paleoanthropist. He found a skull cap, a molar, and a femur from Indonesia. These bones were different from normal human bones. They had a more pronounced, as you can see in the picture, they had a more pronounced brow ridge and a protruding jaw and large teeth. Not to mention, these bones were also all around much thicker than the human bones that we have today. All of these ideas go into account for the fact that these were the most dominant species all across the globe at this time. The Homo sapiens would then also become and remain the conqueror of the rest of the world. We did this by doing things like being the first to use tools and made out of bone and made out of that stone that would withstand these temperatures and these climates that they were in. And so back to the topic of fire. During this era, fire was also used to reduce mortality rates, whether they knew that they were doing that at that time or not. I'm sure they probably weren't, in that they weren't connecting those facts together, but they were reducing mortality rates because they started to be able to cook their food. So a lot of studies have shown that bacterial diseases, particularly those caused by pathogens like salmonella, were very prevalent during this time. So now we're cooking their food, less people are dying from eating things that were not cooked. Fire also helped with a number of people who were dying from hypothermia. Like I said, there was a lot of ice caps forming. The climate was becoming very cool. A lot of these early humans weren't able to adapt to that. And so it helped with that. Fire also led to early humans into caves. It meant that they were able to go into those very dark caves because now they had fire to see. And so because they were able to go into these dark caves, that meant that they were able to protect themselves better from predators. Instead, predators aren't often going to go into those caves to look for their food. It was also thought that the Homo erectus species were the first to create rafts. Now, these weren't like big rafts that you can see today, but they were small ones created with scraps of pieces of wood, and it was just enough to allow them to be able to travel around the island at least. And so the last phase was the Neolithic era. This era was said to be what changed the way humans lived forever. It was the final stage of technological advances in the Stone Age. It was what shifted from hunting and gathering to now farming and settling in a life. This change led to a huge increase in population. These early humans were so skilled at adapting to their environment. The life of these hunter-gatherers were very unpredictable when they would have to go leave and search for their food. And sometimes they would be having long travel days, long travel periods of times, or also depending on the climate, they would have to eat what was available. So like there's seasons for nuts that they would eat a lot, seasons for berries, and if it wasn't in season, they weren't able to eat that. It did start to become easier for these early humans when the Ice Age ended. It brought warmer climates, new plants and animals out. Humans also began experimenting with their own food. The present day Middle East is where the Neolithic revolution really began. This is because this is where wild grains like wheat were really plentiful. People began planting crops and domesticating animals like sheep, goats, and cattle. This started to show a new way of living for families. Families started to be able to settle down in one place and establish homes. This led to families building farming communities. Farming began to have a huge impact on human life. It meant that people no longer had to travel for days at a time just to gather their food. This Neolithic area changed not only how people got their food, but how people viewed civilization. It was overall one of the most impactful times that came from the Stone Age. And that is all. Thank you.